For over 3,300 years, the Torah has been a living document, a guidebook for people of all ages, from ancient times to the modern age.
They tell the story about a man whose wife was in labor for a very long time. Hour after hour, he paces the hallways, again and again inquiring of the nurses as to the progress of the childbirth. His shirt is soaked in sweat. His nerves are literally shot. Finally, after hours of anticipation, the doctor pokes his head out the door and says, "Congratulations, Mr. Goldstein. You have a new baby girl." "A girl?" he responds. "That's great news. That's amazing. That's wonderful." "Why is that so great?" the doctor asks him. "Well, doctor, she won't ever have to go through what I just went through." The book of Exodus begins with the story of the Jewish people becoming enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. Pharaoh imposes all types of hard labor upon the Jewish people, and yet no matter how hard he made them work, no matter how much back-breaking labor he forced upon them, they continued to grow even stronger. The Torah says that the more the Egyptians afflicted the Jewish people, the more they increased and multiplied. One day, Pharaoh's astrologers tell him that a boy will be born who will be the one that will ultimately redeem the Jewish people from Egypt. And of course, that was Moses. Undoubtedly, Pharaoh wants to prevent that from happening, so he resolves to have all the baby boys put to death. Exodus chapter 1, "And Pharaoh commanded his entire people, saying, Any boy that will be born shall be thrown into the Nile River, and every girl should be let live." The question that begs to be asked is this: why does Pharaoh concern himself with the baby girls? Why is the fact that the girls are allowed to remain alive important enough that it's worth any mention in the Torah? In what way is that even related to the decree against the baby boys? And more importantly, the Torah is not merely a history book, but a book of instruction. What lesson can we learn from this statement about the girls? The Hebrew word tichayun means not only that the baby girls should be allowed to live, but more than that the Egyptians should help them live. Pharaoh decreed to his people that every baby girl that is born should be assimilated into the Egyptian lifestyle. Every girl should be raised to emulate and imitate the Egyptian way of life, to adopt the immoral practices and behaviors of the infamously degenerate Egyptian culture. Pharaoh's intent was to physically annihilate the boys, to literally drown them in the Nile River. And the girls were meant to experience a spiritual death. They were to be thrown into the figurative Nile, to be inculcated with an appreciation for material indulgence, to become comfortable and familiar with the licentious behaviors that were emblematic of the ancient Egyptian people. The Midrash tells us that the Egyptian exile is the root of all of the subsequent exiles of the Jewish people. Even today in our generation, there exists a Pharaoh, so to speak. While we wish to give our children and ourselves opportunities to broaden our understanding of the Torah and deepen our connection with our heritage, there are influences that sway our resolve and pose as a barrier between us and our Father in heaven. The values and priorities coming from Hollywood and pop culture invite our children to plunge into the modern-day Nile, to take a dip into a lifestyle where there are no borders, where nothing is off limits, where there is no sanctity. The ancient Egyptians deified the Nile River, for it provided them with all of their material needs. In the world around us today, we see the great pursuit of material immoderation and the worship of the almighty dollar. Oftentimes, the pursuit of providing for our material needs, the concerns and pressures of our daily lives can make us sacrifice our standards and shift our priorities. The Talmud tells us an interesting story. During the time of Pharaoh's decree against the baby boys, the men refused to continue having children, as what was the point? Pharaoh was going to kill them anyway. And it was the righteous women of that generation that convinced their husbands to continue bringing children into the world regardless of Pharaoh's decree. They felt that their responsibility was to follow God's command. And God alone would ensure that ultimately Pharaoh and his people would be punished, and the children of Israel would survive those difficult times and enter into the promised land. And as they say, the rest is history. I'm Rabbi Benny Rappaport, and thank you for joining us.